part of us that needs to allow for that magic to happen. We have to know that there is this force, there is this thing, you know, whether it's God, whether it's the universe, whatever you believe, in some way, at some level, your life is trying to communicate with you. You can be walking through the living room at your house, the kids or your partner, somebody's watching a movie or a commercial, something, just in passing. And there's this slight little phrase, a little thing that the person on the other side of the movie said. You didn't pay attention to anything else, but in those 3 seconds, 5 seconds, you heard something they said. And every one of those things is intuition. It's planting a seed in the garden of the mind. It's our job to be able to quiet the noise, because intuition comes like a whisper, and it's so quiet and so light and so soft. Many people miss it because of all of the noise that they've created in their life.
So the main thing I recommend is people start by meditating. If you go on a walk and you're in nature, that's a perfect time to just pay attention to your breathing as you're walking. It's all about getting back to an observer state of being, where you notice that you're not the problems in your life, you're not the role that you play, you're not the thoughts that you think, you're the observer of that. So you're the one who is making the choice in all these things, and you have a lot more choice than you thought you did. I pick up expectations and fears and doubts and misgivings about things that have happened. And if I let that clog up my entire cognitive system, then pretty soon all of my decisions are being based on my fears, my doubts. So meditation helps me clear out those beliefs that get in the way. It's just like clogging things up, just like you need to vacuum your house and clean your refrigerator, and you need to clean your mind.
What is meditation? Can we simplify it? Can the normal person, the average person, do it without leaving their home, without leaving their job? What does it take to meditate? How do we do it? What happens when the mind settles down and the body settles down and our sense of self disappears? I teach a lot of essentials for meditation, but the 3 ingredients we all have: gentle attention, a willingness to sit down and do it, and then something to pay attention to. And you come back again and again and again and again to the focus of your meditation, whether it's your breath or a mantra, whether it's a candle flame or an emotion. And no matter how many times you go off topic, you come back again, again, again. So a lot of people say, I can't meditate, and I say, why? And they say, I don't have enough time. I say, well, how much time do you stand in line for a cup of coffee? How much time do you spend on social media, on the web? And I say, take 10 minutes of that and turn it back to yourself. And asking that question, who am I? Who am I really? Who is it that's living through me, that's looking through my eyes?
Consciousness is so obvious that for many people, they don't even know what you're talking about. Most academics, and this is now true everywhere in the world, are taught according to principles that have developed within Western science. That scientific worldview is based on a philosophical set of assumptions known as materialism. So materialism, in a nutshell, means that everything is made out of matter and energy, including mind, including consciousness, including everything we know about subjectivity. That's the prevailing view. So if you're challenging that view, you have the same problem that you would in any domain where you start challenging the status quo. The status quo doesn't like to be challenged, so it will push hard against anything that challenges it and attempt to squash it. This is the problem of materialism. Materialism doesn't know what to do with consciousness, so it sort of sets it aside. We'll worry about that later. Or it comes up with the idea that somehow the brain is complex enough that it gives rise to experience, even though nobody has any idea how that could possibly be. And we know that materialism is pretty good because it gives us the technology to do this sort of an interview with a special machine that captures my image and so on. So we don't want to throw materialism away. It's too good. The question is it good enough to account for everything? And here's where we have the problem. Clearly, it is not accounting for all of the experiences that people talk about. So what's missing? When you look at the esoteric traditions, you immediately bump up against what might be thought of as proto-science. So alchemy, astrology, and herbalism. Alchemy was the forerunner of chemistry, astrology is the forerunner of astronomy to some extent, and herbalism is the forerunner of pharmaceuticals. What's interesting is that historically, that all three of those proto-sciences also had a fourth element in it, the element of consciousness. So the practitioner of alchemy or the practitioner of astrology or herbalism knew that their intention was a very important component of what they were doing. This is true in each case. And yet science has stripped that out. You don't consider when you take a pill that your intention is important, except maybe as a placebo. But certainly when you're preparing something like metals or in chemistry, people don't think about that. But that was part of the original idea. And so I think what we're happening now is that science is slowly beginning to mature to the point where it sees that the intention and consciousness of the scientist is as important an ingredient as it was in alchemy and astrology and so on. So I looked in detail at the esoteric traditions, all the way back from shamanism to Pythagoras, Eastern traditions, all the way up to the present time. And you find that there's a similar thread of thought. And basically they're saying that a better model of reality is idealism, that everything is made out of mind, including matter. That solves at one stroke, if that method is correct, if that assumption is correct. It solves all of the puzzles about psychic phenomena and mysticism and all of that stuff. So now consciousness came here first. And so the challenge, the scientific challenge is how do we get from pure awareness to emerge into space and time and matter and energy? How do we do that? Well, there are lots of people working on that very problem. How do you emerge out of something that seems non-physical into physicality?
When we recognize that every single material thing at its core is energy and everything is vibrating, then you can get a feeling for this nature of existence that is not as materially real as we tend to think. And to me, that's what it's really about. The nature of reality itself is consciousness looking at itself. It's basically a feedback loop. So we're looking at the outside world, realizing, wait a minute, maybe what we're seeing is consciousness itself, and it starts to seem that is the case. So we're at a time in our history where quantum physics is challenging all of us to take a whole new look at the way we see the world.
Some scientists who strongly resist this are of the opinion that we basically understand how reality works. There's a couple of things left over to mop up, but we kind of got it. I think that view is so arrogant. And even just from a historical perspective, you see about every 20 years, some prominent scientist saying, well, it's all wrapped up. We just have these one or two things left to fix, and then we got it all. It's just stupid from my perspective. Science is young, and we have far more things that we don't understand fundamentally at all than we do understand a little bit. And that's one of the fears that arises then. You say, well, I've spent my entire career as a professor professing certain ideas about the way things work, and you're coming to me and saying, actually, you didn't understand that at all. Well, that's frightening. I mean, no one wants to think that they don't know what's going on. This is one of the reasons why the Institute of Nordic Sciences is a private, nonprofit institution, because we're looking at things that do challenge the status quo. You can't do this in the academic world. We were among the first to support research on meditation, research on the positive psychological and health consequences of things like gratefulness and forgiveness, the mind-body connections and health, and so on. We were supporting these kinds of ideas at a time when they were considered laughable and extremely risky. So if somebody wants to live a comfortable life, the easiest thing to do is to go along with the flow, always. And if someone has a family and they have children to support and all that, it is actually the responsible thing for the sake of the rest of the family to not challenge the status quo. We live in a society that is constantly pushing certain ways to be. And among other things, we are not taught to think for ourselves or to think critically or to question our own motives and our unconscious desires. It requires taking risk. But so what? Life is a risk.
It's a challenge to face up to a lot of opposition. Collectively, there's a driving force that tends to move events in a certain direction. And if you've ever gone up against it, it can feel like a fish swimming upstream. Like you're going one direction and everyone else is going somewhere else. The more you go into this practice of meditation and the more you recognize that you are consciousness, I would not say it becomes easy, but it becomes possible to stand up to society, to your parents, or your internalization of what you think your parents want for you. And the funny thing about doing this quantum jumping is often you'll notice that people seem like they change, and where there had been opposition, now there's support.
I know a lot of people have a struggle with their parents because their parents aren't supporting them in doing what they love. Their parents have a different idea. My father certainly did. He was concerned for me. Going into theater and music did not seem like a good idea. He wanted me to go into business. And I realized, I got deep somehow, that it doesn't do any good to do what your parents want. You have to do what you want. But it doesn't do any good to fight them either. So I ignored my father. He complained to my brother. He said, "Mark is so slippery. You know, he just blows me off. He doesn't fight me. He doesn't object. He just sort of slides away."
One of the requisites of change is that you have to deal with objections at home or in whatever environment you go back to. So let's say you want to do a lot of work on your identity. All of a sudden you're awakening your ability to cause changes in accordance with your will. You're starting to tap into feelings of worthiness, start to feel strong, but then you go home. And these people have a picture of you that is not the picture that you're working to become. It's the old you. And it may not have even been accurate, but it's their image of you. And I think you can say, hey, look, I'm really working on this. This is really, really important to me. This is who I'm working to become. And I'd really love to count on your support. I know you're just kidding, but I'd appreciate it if you just cut it out for now. And if you don't respect that, I'm going to have to ask you to leave, or I'm just going to not hang out with you. I don't want someone else to sabotage right now. It might mean not responding. It might mean hardening yourself psychologically to be able to handle it. You can't always ask other people to change. Most of the time they won't.
Not everybody really wants help. One thing I've learned in the hard way in this field is some people just want to complain. Some people want to complain about the problem and don't actually want to resolve the problem. And we've all had friends or heard of somebody that they always seem to find themselves in the same type of scenario, the same type of issue, the same relationship, even though with 3 or 4 different people, it's the same story. It's like, look, you're always attracting people like this. Something is going on with you internally that you need to resolve in order to move on to the next level of life. But not everybody really wants to change. It's very possible. But you also must believe, have the faith that it's possible, and then just align yourself with the people out there that are also on the same wavelength, so to speak, and stay away from the people that are going to drag you down, you know. And we really need to dictate and decide up front how much time we are willing to put into those friendships or those partnerships or those people. And you have to think about that in advance. You can't just let it work out however it's going to work out, because it will suck up all of your energy, and you have to keep your energy intact and focused for what the things that are really most important to you.
One of the best things you can do is just set a good example, and it's hard to help people unless they ask for help. So I don't recommend pushing your values on someone else unless they ask you, like, what are you doing? Otherwise, probably that's not their path right now. You need to be your own example of being the change that you wish to see in the world.
Everything happens exactly as it should. And then it's a very unique place to be able to be grateful for where we are today. Grateful for what you have, grateful for what we've accomplished, grateful for our experiences, yet at the same time be able to want or expect or allow more to continue to come in.
Life can be very complicated and difficult when people are grasping all the time. And I think when we're constantly achieving something new instead of celebrating what is, we become less and less satisfied. It's like a drug. Money is a drug, sex is a drug, shopping is a drug. It's a bottomless pit trying to satisfy ourselves.
This culture, especially in the United States, this society really has this like succeed, excel. It's a consumer mentality. Do more, buy more, be more, have more, bigger house, bigger car, fill up a garage full of 10,000 rolls of toilet paper and buy as much as you can. And people have garages and storages and more stuff, and they have so much stuff they can't even store the stuff. They had to pay for a place to store the stuff that they can't even store at their own house. And this is the way people live. Just because you have more externally, it doesn't always correlate to being internally fulfilled. Those are two completely different things. And external, in your environment, the house, the cars, the stuff, is never fulfilling. It's short term. You get the fulfillment, you buy it, you have it, you play with it, and you get the short term, like instant gratification type of thing. But just like a child with a new toy, you run out of motivation after a little while and you're on to the next toy.
The ultimate insanity of it was the 80s. I remember a guy, he actually had a bumper sticker saying, "Whoever dies with the most toys wins." And I remember thinking, wrong. That's not true. It's not about amassing more and more toys. True, when you're poor, there's a lot of stress about paying the bills, but going purely for material success will never achieve the satisfaction that we're all looking for in life. You got to be careful to keep your life simple, because the kingdom of heaven is within.
I think more and more conscious business owners have to start thinking in terms of there's enough for everyone. More often than not, there are solutions, there are ways to be more inclusive. You can find that, hey, if I'm doing hypnosis and hypnotherapy and all sorts of wonderful stuff, and there's someone else who doesn't near me, well, why do I have to see them as a competitor? Why not introduce myself? Why not connect and think about how can we benefit each other? There's enough of the resources, money, people around that if you have a good product, if you have a good service, there's enough for everyone.
John Templeton put it so simply. He said, the way to get wealthy is to make others wealthy. But I kind of think on this planet, there has been progress made, and we do take 2 steps forward and then sometimes a huge step back as the old systems are thrashing out, fighting for survival. And in the long run, I would think the worldview based on love and partnership, working it out with everybody, realizing we are one global family.
We're in some ways experiencing a dark time, in some ways we're experiencing a renaissance. And so there's some threats to our existence right now. But we also have more and more people who are paying attention, and more people who are looking for solutions in areas that we didn't look before. Get out there and do something nice for somebody, and don't expect anything in return. Be kind. People need it. If we remember that the people who we complain about are human, that underneath their beliefs and ideologies, they're human beings, it opens up our ability to hear one another.
Sometimes we buy into the materialistic world and we think that we have no power. We think that we're victims. But actually, there's a great deal more power in each of us, and all of us together collectively, than most of us ever realize. It's up to all of us to encourage ourselves and one another to maintain that sense of who we really are. Because I believe very strongly that this is the time in our world's history where it's more important than ever before that people recognize this.
I think for those people who don't settle down their nervous system with meditation, or who don't have a spiritual or creative practice, their mind is constantly traveling into the past, into the future, and into other people's business. And when that happens, they're not present for themselves and the world that's being revealed to them. And a Zen master might say, show me the future, show me your past, and there's no way to do it. Those questions, they stop the mind. Your mind will gyrate a little bit and then eventually it settles down. We dive into the source of everything. We started naming some of the qualities of it. It's eternal, it's ever-present, it's intelligent. That's the transcendence, is when we lose track of time and space and we transcend the element of materialism. But we can't just go there because we want to. Will doesn't have much to do with it. You cannot will your mind to stop thinking. You cannot will desires to be made manifest. You cannot will enlightenment. You can't will it. It just happens on its own accord, spontaneously. You have to be present, and here it comes. That's how I navigate life, with faith, patience, and grace.
We sometimes get a feeling like there's something else going on here, that there's something much more connected, that in a very real sense, we're sharing the same dream. And so I recognize that I'm in some ways playing a role, but who I really am is so much bigger, so much more mysterious. It's eternal, it's infinite, it's timeless, it's connected to everything. Then there's this collaboration, a symphony of all these different harmonious pieces, each of us playing a part of the overall song, and that this is the so-called music of the spheres, that it's our consciousness that creates all of this. And when we get there, then that is oneness, because everything's back together again, but in such a way that we don't know what we're looking at.
And we never actually know. We hope we're getting closer to understanding it, but I sometimes suspect that as humans, we don't have the capacity to actually understand what's going on. And I see this reflected a little bit when you have a mystic who can go into mystical states. They come back with a conviction that, I understand it now, I got it. And say, well, tell me, what is it? And the response is, it's ineffable. I cannot describe it. And the reason is that that language at the everyday level is not capable of describing what's actually going on. Some mystics will say that they come out of the mystical state and then they see the world in a new way, and everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be.
I think mystics, philosophers, poets, they express the reality better than maybe you or I, because they allude to it. And that's the same with waking up to that which is looking through your eyes. You can call it anything you want. Some people call it self with a capital S. Some people call it spirit, God, soul, the Great Spirit, consciousness itself. It's that which animates all of this. It's what's residing at your deepest level.
The ancient notion of Indra's net is this necklace with lots of glittering pieces of crystal in it. And so each one is the universe, but all the facets on it are reflecting all of the others. So you have this amazing network of awareness, which is seeing itself reflected again and again and again in an infinite number of ways. So it's sort of simmering at some universal unconscious level, trying to wake up from a dream, and when finally whatever we are understands it, or it understands itself, it wakes up and the dream is over. I see it as you go along in your daily life, you are a certain way, and then one day you wake up. And from that moment, everything before that seems like a dream. And you can wake up multiple times. So in my life, I remember 2 instances where just walking to class in college one day in the morning, I woke up. I mean, it was a very strange experience, a little bit like you're sleeping, and now you wake up and you become aware. There was a step function while walking to class one morning that everything before that I felt as though I was sleeping, and that this has happened twice. So I'm imagining that there are many things that can push that kind of experience. The more awake you are and the less dreaming you are, I think the closer to enlightenment you get.
For me, enlightenment is to attain that sense of self that is pure consciousness, and to recognize that that's the real you, that who you are is infinite, is eternal, is connected, and that's the you that's looking out through your eyes, who is so much wiser, so much more connected, so much more involved in everything. And That's your true identity.
We are the creation of the forces of life, an eternal blend of ecstasy and strife, living as long as the universe stays, which is forever through the galaxy's nights and days. From the Big Bang's beginning to the black hole's destruction is but a day in the life of our cosmic construction. We'll live forever with the stuff of stars, ever changing, ever growing, born into this life, born into that, changing this form for the one that comes next, an eternal part of an eternal creation, a quintessential piece of divine revelation.
I am this creation.